Warning. The following video contains spoilers for the game Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, alongside mild spoilers for other entries in the series. If you plan on experiencing Ace Attorney blind, I highly recommend playing the games before watching this video. Obligatory disclaimer complete. Let's start the game. The year was 2012. I was starting my second year of sixth form, and while I had been a big fan of the Ace Attorney series, there had never been a mainline entry for me to anticipate. That was until autumn of the very same year. I went home and went online to find that Ace Attorney 5 had been announced to the world. Not only was my favorite video game series getting a new entry, but my favorite character was back after all of the pain he endured in the previous entry. Shortly after its announcement, the first trailer dropped, and it looked absolutely gorgeous. It was everything I had been expecting in a Nintendo 3DS Ace Attorney game. And I didn't have to wait long. By October of 2013, I was starting my first year of university, and while other students were outside partying and socializing, making bonds that would last a lifetime, I was in my dormitory, alone, playing my Nintendo 3DS and my newly downloaded version of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. I'm not saying I didn't make friends at university, I'm just saying that Ace Attorney has and always will be a priority. For several days I played that game, right up until the credits. I was just as absorbed into it as I was with the original trilogy. But even then, I knew that something was a little off. It's been almost a decade since then, and despite it being at the time everything I'd ever hoped for in an Ace Attorney sequel, it just didn't stick with me like the other games. Was it the graphical overhaul? The way it abandoned plot threads from Apollo Justice? Series fatigue? Or something else? Today, I plan on getting to the bottom of why this game doesn't resonate with a lot of people, and why my relationship in particular with it has been a little turbulent, for lack of a better word. The goal of this video is to establish how Dual Destinies was developed, what led to its shortcomings, and how I feel about it in general. And if you haven't played through Dual Destinies, this video isn't going to convince you, so as I mentioned in the spoiler warning, you should probably play for yourself, because it is worth checking out. I do think that Dual Destinies So, grab a drink, get a snack, and let's get to it. The original Ace Attorney games were the vision of one man, Shu Takumi, a gentleman I have referenced in every video I've ever made on this channel because frankly, he deserves a lot more credit. He put a lot of himself into the character, to the point where you could argue that Phoenix Wright is almost a self-insert. But over time, Phoenix began to come into his own, and definitely gained his own core set of beliefs. Shu Takumi's final depiction of the character left him as a mentor to Apollo, a father to Trucy, and an overall well-put-together adult who seemed cool and collected at all times. There was so much potential for his story to develop alongside the new rookie Apollo. So what happened? Well, Shu Takumi didn't make Ace Attorney 5. He was busy with Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright, which itself is a really good game, and I recommend checking out my review of it if you haven't. It was written by someone else. A team of people, in fact. A team led by this guy, Takeshi Yamazaki. Takeshi had been working at Capcom for a few years, and even assisted on Ace Attorney 4 alongside one of the spin-off games. Aside from that, his only experience with video games was Virtua Pro Football, Puyo Puyo 20th Anniversary, and Sonic Colors. Clearly the guy to take charge of an established Japanese visual novel series. Okay, I don't mean to dunk on the guy, and we've all got to start somewhere. Maybe his experience working on the other games was enough for him to take the helm of this new entry. While other producers such as Motohide Eshiro did take part in the game's development, Yamazaki was the driving force behind the game's influence. Yamazaki wanted the narrative to revolve around using analytical psychology in pursuit of the truth. An interesting premise. In fact, him and the other producers had some wild ideas while they were developing Ace Attorney 5. Ideas for the game included a 200-year-old immortal prosecutor and a prosecutor who could pay off any witness. These were both scrapped in favor of Simon Blackwell, a prosecutor who is also a convicted felon, convicted of murder. I'll give the series credit. I personally am a fan when Ace Attorney branches out into the weird, wild, and wonderful, as long as the rules it establishes fit within that world. They also had the idea of playing as 5 different lawyers, because it's Ace Attorney 5. Yeah, not every idea was a gem. Initial ideas for incorporating analytical psychology included goggles that could look at a witness's personality spectre, whatever that means, and a computer which could analyze the witness's brainwaves. Eventually, these ideas became the Mood Matrix, a gizmo they would give to the new character Athena Cykes. They wanted Athena to be less of a cheerleader and more of a partner with an active role in both the cases and the story. Here is where one of the game's first problems becomes apparent. We had just introduced a new main protagonist in the last entry, and here we are one game later with another new main character. The focus is all over the place, and the key word there is focus. Dual Destinies is simultaneously the triumphant return of a legendary lawyer, the second chapter in Apollo Justice's career, and the start of a new attorney's journey. It's possible this game doesn't resonate with a lot of people because we don't get a great deal of time alongside these characters. Speaking of people, let's talk about... In Japan, the game was received rather well. In fact, during my online research, I couldn't find any controversy. The Japanese gaming publication Famitsu gave it a 37 out of 40, which is quite high. In the West, things weren't as clear-cut. Some websites gave it glowing reviews, but places like IGN gave it a 7.2, citing that the new mechanic was one note. Did Chuck Osborne have a point? Well, many agreed with him. The game was undoubtedly divisive. It didn't matter where you went. Reddit, 4chan, everyone shared the same opinion. The game was... not bad. Perhaps my memory isn't the greatest, but I recall at the time people really did like the characters in Dual Destinies. So much so that people were asking for Athena Cykes to have her own entry. Even these days, I still see comments with people asking for Athena to have her own game. It's not an idea I'm against, however, it would have to be thought through rather well. I read like every single comment, by the way, so if you have something to say about this game, please leave your thoughts down below. Well, how does one judge the quality of a game like Ace Attorney? It comes down to 2 points. The engrossing narrative and the puzzles. The second point also depends on the person. If the puzzles are too easy, then they're boring, and if they're too difficult, then they're frustrating. Everyone who plays Ace Attorney is going to fall somewhere in between those two extremes, and your enjoyment of the game will depend thereof. But consider the following. Dual Destinies shows you who the killer is for the first 2 cases, and in the third case they make it incredibly obvious. Granted, these cases have twists, turns, and reveals, however, none are particularly memorable. Apparently, Yamazaki wrote the plot twists first, and then built the narrative on top of those. This method has potential, however, I feel he should have started with the character motivations. In any good story, what the character desires drives the plot forward. Luke Skywalker wants to join the Rebels. Marty McFly wants to go back to the future. Phoenix Wright wants to save the person who saved him. In those examples I gave, the characters all endure trials and tribulations, and we grow alongside them because of it. Dual Destinies just kind of throws things at you out of nowhere. Oh, Apollo Justice wants to meet his childhood friend. Who is he and why should you care? Oh, too bad he's already dead. One game later, Spirit of Justice would also bring back a character from Apollo's past. But in this case, it would take the time to develop their relationship, and pulls it off a lot better. The team behind the game wanted to have their cake and eat it. They wanted a game that was accessible to new players, revealing the killers from the start, while also continuing the stories of well-established characters. Speaking of the characters, I want to talk about the headlining hero himself, Mr. Phoenix Wright. A comment I often see online is, why did Phoenix revert back to his old personality in Dual Destinies? And I'm not entirely sure I agree with this. I'll concede that his character isn't one-to-one with his appearance in Apollo Justice, however there's a good reason for that. In that game, Phoenix was keeping his cards close to his chest. We only saw the version of him that he wanted Apollo to see. Secondly, it's quite a stretch to say they act the same. In the third case of Dual Destinies, Phoenix nonchalantly comes across a dead body and begins his investigation immediately, like a professional. During the game, Phoenix is cooler and calmer. His ability to bluff is on another level, and he doesn't succumb to pressure quite as easily. Phoenix has a powerful presence, which he only emitted in glimpses during the original trilogy. The potential that Mia saw in him is on full display. Even Apollo steps into his own a little. During the final case, him and Phoenix are at ideological odds. Phoenix wholeheartedly believes in Athena, but Apollo just can't bear to deny the evidence in front of him. Apollo, blinded by his desire to avenge Clay, a fact not so subtly referenced in his post-explosion getup. I have to admit, I got chills during the final case when Phoenix and Edgeworth went up against each other once again. But I wonder if someone new to the series would feel the same. One of the overarching plotlines in Dual Destinies is the Dark Age of the Law. After Phoenix was found guilty of using forged evidence, Christoph Gavin was arrested for being a horrible human being, and Blackquill was seemingly arrested for committing murder. Well, the public have lost faith in the legal system. And after this plotline is established, the game doesn't really explore it at all. And this is the game that takes place in a law school for one case. In fact, let's talk about that case. During Turnabout Academy, the culprit Aristotle Means, that's his name. During Turnabout Academy, the culprit Aristotle Means hits you over the head with the ends justify the means speech so many times that it becomes a little two-dimensional. Instead of actually exploring the argument of do the ends justify the means, the game makes its supporting character look like this! It's not subtle, and there was so much squandered potential. That's a really good word, squandered. I like that. So aside from the focus being all over the place, we have to talk about how the game concludes. Technically, cases 4 and 5 are part of the same story. However, Turnabout for Tomorrow, the final case, sees everything come together. Apollo, desperate to avenge Clay and unable to trust his colleagues, decides to leave the office. But unbeknownst to them, there's another player in this game. A mastermind of sorts. Or more accurately, a phantom. The trial shifts attention to Simon Blackquill, who testifies that he murdered Athena's mother. Athena, sensing the discourse in Simon's heart, knows that he didn't do it, and decides to pursue a career in law to save his life. Doesn't that sound a bit familiar? Remember how I said that Dual Destinies mimics a lot of beats from the original Ace Attorney games? Well, this is especially the case when Athena convinces herself that she is responsible for her own mother's death, quite similar to how Miles Edgeworth believed he murdered his own father in the first game. Blackquill decided to take the fall, believing that Athena truly did murder her own mother. And while this case did take notes from the original game, I was still intrigued to see how it would resolve. But did it stick the landing? Well, it turns out there was an elusive imposter, known as the Phantom, sent to the space station 7 years ago to sabotage their launch for unknown, top-secret spy reasons by an unnamed organization that is never mentioned again. During the Phantom's espionage, he killed Athena's mother, however made one crucial mistake. After being attacked by Athena, some of his blood ended up on a moon rock, which was then sent into space for 7 years. Now it's come back to Earth, and the Phantom strikes again. Wanting to destroy all evidence of him ever being there, he infiltrates the space station, this time claiming the life of Clay Terran. This guy is cold. real cold, even going as far as to bomb a courtroom after he couldn't get his way at the space station. But his mystique is a double-edged sword. While it is mysterious that we don't quite understand his motivations, it also means we can't really get invested in him as a villain. The question of who is the Phantom is significantly less interesting than why is the Phantom. Ace Attorney's greatest villains all have something in common: clear motivations. Sometimes they're a little out there, but if the story can convince you that the character believes what they're doing is right, that's what makes a compelling story. And honestly, I kind of like the idea of the Phantom. I just don't think they pulled it off. As I mentioned earlier, Yamazaki wrote most of the plot twists before starting to build a story around them, and it shows. The cases come across as a little sporadic, except for the DLC case, Turnabout Reclaimed. Written by Yuki Nakamura, this case, despite being about Phoenix defending a killer whale, is one of the most fun and interesting in the series. I've been bashing Dual Destinies a fair amount, but the game does do a lot of things right. The new 3D models are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, and the 3-dimensional crime scenes are a joy to explore. The mood matrix, despite not being a particularly deep mechanic, is still fun to play around with. I like the way Yamazaki incorporated it into these trials. Another new addition to the game is Thought Root, which allows you to piece together a case from the very start until the shocking conclusion. The problem is, if these conclusions feel forced, nonsensical, or too obvious, they fall completely flat. However, there are a few occasions when Thought Root really does pack a punch, and when it does, it hits hard. I don't have to mention how incredible the soundtrack is. Noriyuki Iwadare does an amazing job here, just like he did with Trials and Tribulations and the investigation games. Honestly, I don't think there's a single Ace Attorney game with a lackluster soundtrack. That's the thing about this game. There is so much to love, and it's clear that a lot of care and attention went into it. The game feels similar to Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It retreads old ground, revisits old characters while trying to do its own thing, and ultimately, nothing really works in the long run. Unfortunately, it's a bit too reminiscent of those original games. Spirit of Justice took a lot more chances, and was in my opinion a step in the right direction. I can take myself back to how excited I was to play Ace Attorney 5 when it initially came out. And yet, outside of this analysis, these days, the game hardly crosses my mind. It's a shame, but on the other hand, I felt passionately enough to make this video. So that's gotta mean something. I'll always love Ace Attorney, and maybe someday I'll learn to love its 5th entry. It was ambitious, but some might say disappointing. As for me, Dual Destinies will always be that one game that left me feeling just a little bit melancholy. But what do you think? I know that a lot of people really do like Dual Destinies for a lot of other reasons, and I would love to hear them in the comments. So please, if you liked this video, go ahead, leave your opinion. I can't wait to hear it. Until then, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a nice day, and take care.